Welcome everyone. So I can see we're recording, that's great. We've got an action-packed session today. Thanks to Colin for organising it. First of all, we've got Dominique Parrish joining us from ASCILITE to talk about the TELAS, the Technology Enhanced Learning Accreditation Scheme. Dominique is currently the Associate Dean of Education in Faculty of Science, Medicine and Health at the University of Wollongong. And previously she was the Director of Learning, Teaching and the Student Experience at Wollongong as well. So she comes with a great background and great experience that she can bring to talking about TELAS and giving us an understanding of what that's looking like and how we might be able to feed into that. So she's supported UOW with a number of projects, so delivering excellence in learning and teaching across the faculty, feeding into strategic goals, responsibility for faculty-wide leadership and management of academic quality and standards. So her background, is directly linked into this. So, and she's responsible for the management of ASCILITE Secretariat from 2008 to 2011, and executive manager from 2010 to 2011. So there's a number of other things which I'm sure I'm sure she'd be able to talk to as well. So for the interest of time, I might let you get started, Dominique. Thanks so much for joining us. And just anyone else who's currently listening in, if you can mute your microphone, if you're not speaking or, when presenters are speaking, just so we don't get too much background noise, that would be great. Feel free to post any questions in the chat if you're worried that you're going to forget about them, and we'll have some questions at the end of Dominique's session. So if everybody could join me in welcoming Dominique. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Kate. It's a pleasure. So I'll jump straight in because I have quite a few slides and a lot to talk about. The Technology Enhanced Learning Accreditation Scheme has come about very much in response to some of our strategic plan priorities and goals. And a couple of years ago, when we were refreshing the strategic plan for ASCILITE, the executive talked about the need for us to be seen as more influential in the recognition and promotion of exemplary online learning. So this scheme evolved as a consequence of trying to address that desire that we had as an executive. The goals of the scheme very much then align to the mission and vision of ASCILITE. So I've just put them up there, and the goals of the scheme are also why we're doing this. First of all, we want to raise awareness of what exemplary practice is. We want to have some means of assuring the quality of online learning, and we want to be able to encourage practitioners and motivate practitioners to use for excellence in the use of digital technologies. We want to, as I mentioned, promote and recognise exemplary innovation and practice, and we want to be able to provide some sort of external validation and measure for benchmarking of what's transpiring across the sector. So they're the whys of the TELAS. I am going to refer to the scheme from here on in as the TELAS. It's just a much simpler way of referring to this very broad thing that we're calling the Technology Enhanced Learning Accreditation Scheme. For the purposes, very early in the piece, we realised we needed to be able to define what TELAS was, what the Technology Enhanced Learning part of TELAS at least was. So we came up with this definition, and the definition's been informed by the TEXA guidance notes. It's been informed by research, and it's been informed by a lot of the intel that we have about what technology enhanced learning is. So we conducted very early in the piece a literature review, and based on that literature review and our synthesis of what we found in that literature review, we came up with this definition. I'll just give you a chance to read it so that I don't skip forward too quickly. So in terms of the implementation of the TELAS, we have had many phases, and apologies, when I developed this slide, it didn't have that messy return on the larger words there. But first and foremost, we decided we needed to conceptualize a framework that would be able to provide a basis by which we could assess what quality in online learning was. And that framework has been developed pretty much for the last year. We've done a lot of work in trying to come up with the basis for the framework, and we haven't finished. We have a draft, and we're about to go into our next round of consultation, stakeholder consultation, which is really going to be to refine and very much come up with what we think is not only our criteria in the framework, but also the success indicators. So we're looking to our TELAS practitioners to be able to help us articulate what is success with regard to the various criteria that we have identified, but also to tell us if that criteria are, should there be more criteria? Are there enough criteria? Are they adequate? That sort of thing. So we've got a lot more rationalisation of that framework still ahead of us. We've also been able to, through numerous consultations, particularly with senior leaders in institutions across Australasia, because they're the people who are going to be basically fronting the funding to be able to operationalise the TELAS. So we've worked with them to figure out what would be the operational details for the implementation of the TELAS, and I can go through that a bit later in the presentation for you, just to give you an idea of how that's going to operate. We've done a lot of stakeholder consultation, and that's actually been ongoing all the way throughout the implementation of this initiative. We are still to do, and of course we're about to get into a new phase of significant stakeholder consultation over August and September, which some of you may be coming to, but we also have an online survey that's going to be part of that stakeholder consultation. Still to come is we are going to be accrediting peer reviewers who we will look to be our the conduits for making the assessment of online learning, and they will be the people who will actually provide the more formal reports that will be given back to people who want to have their online learning packages accredited. So we've got peer reviewer accreditation. We're going to be putting workshops on where we will take people through the peer reviewer program. It's probably going to be a day and a half to 2 days, and those workshops will also be staged around Australasia, and those peer reviewers will be the people who we will look to, they'll be the crux of the scheme. We're looking at then implementing a pilot, so a first phase or rollout of this probably middle of next year. So how have we come to the conceptualization of the framework is where I thought might be the majority of this presentation. We started with this framework, and this framework was very much grounded in a significant literature review of what quality in online learning might look like. And this is the framework that we took to our very first consultation workshop, which was in Wellington, New Zealand last year. And this next slide, if it goes, that has all of the different iterations of the framework laid one on top of the other. And I'm really not expecting anyone to be able to read it, but it's just to give you a sense of there have been numerous iterations of this framework that has surfaced as a result of all of the workshops that we held last year. And just to give you a sense of where those workshops were, these are the locations of the workshops that we held last year, and just an indication of how many attendees we had at each workshop. We also held some student workshops, a student workshop, and we had students attend our Adelaide workshop, and we held a workshop with TAFE stakeholders, which basically for us, because ASCILITE deals with the tertiary sector, we felt it very important that we get the TAFE input, but it became very clear to us that the needs of the TAFE sector and also the focus of what quality is for the TAFE sector is very different. So we've decided to separate the two out, and we're going to start with the higher education sector, and we're going to move into a contextualised framework for TAFE. And it was very clear to us through the TAFE workshop, that message that, you know, don't expect that you're going to be able to have one framework that will be suitable across both sort of environments. So that's still to come. We're going to be working with different TAFE groups when we've finished our Australasian higher education framework. Then we'll be working with the TAFE sector to be able to develop a framework that's suitable for them. So across the workshops that we've held, we had representation from senior leaders in technology enhanced learning, as well as those student leaders. We used student past leaders who work with students and assist students in subjects. So we decided that we'd go with those past leaders because they are a bit au fait with you know, the educational side of learning, or the teaching side of learning. So after all of those workshops, this is the framework that we have come to. This is where it currently sits. What we have is 4 domains: online environment, learning tasks, learner support, and learning resources. Then you can see a definition of what those domains are and what they entail. For each domain, we then have 2 standards, and those are sort of in the blue, you'll see. And then under each standard, we've rationalised a suite of performance criteria. And it's those performance criteria that the next phase will look at, well, what do those performance criteria actually look like in terms of success indicators? So we'll be really teasing out the specifics of each of those criteria and looking at the elements that will be used in assessing the criteria with regard to the when the TELAS gets implemented. So those criteria have been basically, it's the synthesis of all of the workshops that we did. So we went back after we came to this, we went back and we scrutinised every single framework that was developed as a consequence of every single workshop, and we made sure that every single criteria that was identified in those workshops were being captured in this final framework, and they have been. So that's where we're at the moment with the framework. Now, in terms of what we're going to be doing with the performance criteria and how the actual assessment will transpire, or the accreditation, the formal accreditation, I mentioned that with each of the criteria, our workshops that we're going to be holding over August and September are going to be looking at what the success indicators are. And it's those success indicators that will then be used to gauge the measure of performance. So you can see what we've tried to do is we've tried to come up with a Likert scale that is also attached to a quantitative measure. So for example, always has a 4, usually has a 3. The workshops we're going to be looking at also whether this is appropriate, whether that Likert scale is appropriate. What we want to do is we want to be able to come up with a quantitative measure that we can have to be able to assess performance or to measure performance as a consequence of the assessment of each of those criteria in whatever online learning package we're actually going to be assessing or accrediting. So as you can see, it's not always going to be an always to a not at all. There are going to be some criteria that we think will have different measures, different Likert measures. As you can see, they're 1.5. We think it's going to be a yes, a no, or a partial. We don't think that there's going to be those sort of more granular, always, usually, sometimes. The idea is that when this is being formally assessed for accreditation, we will have 2 peer reviewers who will each go in, and they will, according to their assessment, make a judgment on the measure of performance that whatever they're assessing, the online package we're calling it, that the online package against each of those performance criteria, we're looking at what the assessment has indicated should be the measure of performance. So at the end of an assessment, the result might look something like this. The idea is that across each domain, and this is a list of all of the performance criteria for domain 1, which is online environment. Across each of the performance criteria, there would be a resulting measure that would be assigned to each of those criteria for the package that's being assessed. That would then end up being a measure that is out of an overall possible total measure. So in this case, 1.1, this pretend module has been awarded a 4 out of 4. For 1.2, it's been awarded a 3 out of a possible 4, etc., all the way down to a final overall mark, so to speak, of say 22 out of 32, which when you translate that into a percentage, might be 69%. So then we have these accreditation levels, and we would be thinking about, we're looking at giving an accreditation level to every domain and then an overall accreditation level to the overarching full assessment. So in this situation, we would have said that because that online environment domain received a 69%, it's at an accreditation level of silver. And down the bottom, what I've done is I've shown that, for example, if the other domains together equaled, 22 plus 23 plus 35 out of 32 plus 40 plus 40, etc., that would arrive at a percentage of 76%, and that would be equal to a gold. So in this scenario, you would have a silver for the online environment, and you would have a gold for the overall package that's being assessed. So the report would end up looking something like this, with the online environment being a silver accreditation level, the bronze being a gold, the learning tasks being a bronze accreditation level, the learner support being a diamond, learning resources being platinum, etc., and the overall would be gold. So this is the things that we still need to do. When I recently worked with the Times Higher Education, with some lead analysts from Times Higher Education, what they've indicated is that obviously every criteria is not going to be equally weighted. So they have indicated that we need to work out the priority of the criteria within each domain. And we need to make sure or work out if each domain should be equally weighted, or if there is more need for us to weight the criteria and not worry about how many points, so to speak, each domain has. So to do that, what we're currently doing is we have an online survey, and we're asking practitioners, people who are academics, people who are working in the higher education environment, delivering online learning. We're asking them to tell us how important each of the criteria are. We have then got a weighted measure in the tool that we're using. So we will then list every criteria from most important to least important. We'll look at the weighting that it's given through our online, which is SurveyMonkey, our online tool, and we'll, if we say we work out of 100, we will then apportion so many marks, so to speak, out of 100 to each of the criteria based on their weighting. So this is, like I said, this is very beyond what I am capable of in terms of quantitative data analysis, but this was the guidance that I received from the Times Higher Education lead analysts about this is how you should do it. So we're also working with some far more skilled quantitative researchers than I to basically work out the scoring that will sit behind the accreditation and the assessment of the online packages that we are asked to accredit. So we still need to work out which Leichhardt measures are most appropriate. And again, we'll be doing that through our consultation workshops. We're working out the weighting of each criteria and the total score for each domain, and that's being informed by our online survey. And we're working out the accreditation levels and the parameters of the accreditation levels. So some of our feedback so far has said to us, yes, you should have, the 5 that we've indicated. Others have said, no, just make it the 3, gold, silver, bronze. So again, we're coming to our consultation workshops to ask our practitioners, well, what do you think would be most valuable? Do we have accreditation levels and parameters as we've sort of articulated in the presentation today, or do we go with something else? So how the TELAS is going to be operationalised, we're going to have an online environment that is going to be just dedicated to the TELAS. And that online environment will have an interactive framework whereby practitioners can come into the website, they can click on each of those individual criteria, and a little window will come up that will say, this criteria, this is a bit of an explanation of what this criteria means. Here are the success indicators, which again will be informed from our consultation workshops, and here are some exemplars that have been identified by our accredited peer reviewers, and we'll have links to some illustrations of what each of those criteria looks like in practice. So any university can use that, any educational designers, learning designers, educational technologists, anyone can use that online, freely accessible framework. What we will be doing, and our consultation with senior leaders is that they are very supportive of this. What we will be doing is we'll be inviting universities to send their learning designers, educational practitioners to our workshops to learn how to assess using our framework. So then a university will pay, say, $300 to send their ed technologists to this workshop and be accredited, and then they can go back into their university and they can just roll it out at their university and never ever engage with the accreditation scheme. However, if internally they decide that they've got some really niche online products that they want to market, or that they want to recognise, or they want to put forward for the benchmarking, then what they can do is they can then submit to have ASCILITE accredit that online learning package. And I'm calling it an online learning package because there are different categories that we're going to be assessing packages in. So, we've been asked if we would do MOOCs, because that is a means of, they do want to market MOOCs, and a lot of people are using MOOCs now in micro-credentialing and as a taster and a way of getting potential students into their courses. So we've been asked to have, currently the categories that we've identified are MOOCs, blended online delivery, fully online delivery. And this is another element that we're going to be looking to our consultation workshops to try and get our participants in those to give us a sense of, are they the ones that we should have, or are they different ones that we should have? So if as an institution you decide you want to put forward a package to be accredited, then what you would be doing is you'll be paying for that. That will come into ASCILITE. There will be a nomination process, and part of that nomination process is that you have to provide some context to the package that you're submitting for accreditation, but you also have to provide your own individual institutional assessment of that package. Now, that's sort of put on the shelf initially. ASCILITE will appoint 2 peer reviewers. Those 2 peer reviewers will conduct individual assessments of the online learning package. They will plug in their assessments into an online portal, and that online portal will amalgamate the 2 assessments into one report. The 2 peer reviewers then would meet virtually, and they would discuss the ensuing report, so the amalgamated report, and they'll look at whether they're happy with the quantitative results that have come out of that report, because it might be that for one criteria, one assessor may put a 3, another may put a 1, it comes out as a 2, and the person who has indicated that it should be a 1 might not be happy with it being a 2. So there will be opportunity for those peer reviewers in their meeting to be able to override whatever the resulting amalgamation is. Then what they will do is, after they're happy with all of their quantitative results, they will then look at the institutional assessment, and they'll look at where the institutional quantitative results are different to their amalgamated results. And it's where there's differentiation that we're asking them to then put details in the qualitative comments about why there's differentiation. So provide qualitative feedback in the areas particularly where there is differentiation. The report will then also generate on the back page a page of benchmarking. So they will be given a summary at the end that will say, okay, in domain 1, you got a gold accreditation level, you are positioned in this domain, number 3 out of 10 similar submissions that we have accredited for your institution. Now, it may be that you are 1 of 1 because we've not accredited any other submissions from your institution. Then there'll be a regional, so an Australasian benchmark. So it'll say you are now positioned 10 out of 50 similar online learning packages that have been assessed in the region. And then the final one will be you are positioned, say, 70 out of 350 that have been assessed globally. Now, in the first few months, maybe even years, there won't be a lot to compare in terms of the international, because internationally we have actually identified partners that will be doing this with us, that we'll be able to benchmark against, but they want us to go through right through the entire process of conceptualizing what this would look like before we start on them, and have implemented the first pilot before we work with them to contextualize it for their environments. So this is a where to next. We still need to design the peer review program, and that's going to also be informed. We're going to use our consultation workshops to help us identify the sorts of things that that program should include. We're going to need to recruit and then recruit people to come to, or to take part in the peer review workshops, and then we need to facilitate the peer review workshops. And we're not sure how many we'll have in the first year, and we're not sure how many peer reviewers we'll need to accredit. We're doing quite a bit of dissemination at the moment. Obviously, at quite a few conferences, we're promoting the TELAS. We also hope to be able to promote or present at the Spring DVCA Forum, just to give them a bit of a sense of what's out there. We've had quite a bit of contact with TEXA because they're very interested in what we're doing. So we've had conversations about setting up meetings once we're a bit further down the track to show them what the TELAS has evolved into. We have had conversations with like organisations to ASCILITE globally. So we've been in discussions with ALT in the UK, with ILTA in Ireland, and actually I presented in Ireland about the scheme, and there was so much interest in Ireland that we actually had what we call the National Forum ask us if they could come on board and contextualise it and offer the scheme out of their organisation. But we've gone with ILTA, who's a like association to ASCILITE, because there's no political ties, whereas the National Forum is very politically biased, and we've just decided that we want to stay out of that political arena because we don't want any bias to come into this program. And we think part of the credibility is the fact that we are independent of any of those sorts of influences. So we've also talked to OLC in the US, and those conversations are ongoing, and they're all very, very keen to adopt this in their region. As I mentioned, we have to finalise how each of those criteria are going to be measured. The performance is going to be measured, and that's going to be informed by our consultation workshops. And we're just about to embark on discussions with different website providers to see who will have the capability and the capacity to develop the website that we want, which incorporates that reporting tool that I was speaking about in an earlier slide. We're also looking at the accreditation is going to award badges. So it'll award a badge for each domain and an overall accreditation badge, which we will give to the institution / team who develops the online learning course. And those badges could be used, for example, by academics in their promotion, probation type meetings, and if they're going for a new job, they could be using that as a means of evidencing their skills and ability in terms of designing online learning. And it's also then going to be a tool that could be used in marketing. So finally, I mentioned the SurveyMonkey and how important that survey is for us to be able to identify the different weightings that we need to put onto each of the criteria. So that's the link there. It'd be great if you haven't already contributed to it to please have your say. I'll leave that there. And Kate, I guess open to any questions anyone has.
Yeah, so we've got a couple minutes for questions in. We've got Tom as well. So I might just quickly, while people are, if you do want to ask a question, feel free to put it in the chat or raise your hand. But while I'm just waiting, thanks, Colin. I'll just go up and note a couple of the questions that were already put in. So Colin asked if the literature review that the criteria came from, is that available? So you mentioned doing an initial literature review. Is that literature review available in any form that people can have a look at? No?
Have we lost Dom? Are you still with us, Dom?
Sorry, I turned my microphone off so that I wouldn't, I noticed earlier Kate said, if you're not speaking, turn it off. Sorry. And then I was having a lovely little conversation with myself that no one else could hear. So the summary, the literature review was done in EndNote. And what we have done is we have developed a summary of that literature review. It is going to be part of a journal article that's going to be published in AGET. At the moment, I'm still finishing off that article with basically the methodology. So it's going to be the seminal sort of paper that will go with this scheme, and it'll have just the literature review. It's about 6 pages, and the the stages of development that we're going through. So hopefully, I've been talking to the AGET editors, and hopefully we'll be able to get that published very soon. But we will put that as soon as it's completed into a peer-reviewed level. We're going to make that available online. So yes, that's coming.
I think Hank had one, which was for blended delivery. Would it only be the online part that's evaluated, or is there how would any blended courses or blended whatever you want to call them, packages work?
Yep, it is only the online. So the idea is that we will get basically the shell of the course, the online component of the course, and that's what will be assessed. We cannot assess it once there has been engagement, so we won't be assessing any of the delivery side of things, and we make it very clear that we aren't assessing delivery. We're only assessing the affordances of the learning design in terms of the online learning design, and it's only the sort of the shell. So if a student came in and they saw that this online learning package has, diamond, and so it's a really, really good, high quality course. We are making the note that it is very much influenced by the academic, or the teacher. So if the teacher doesn't do anything in that course, obviously it's not going to be a high quality product. But what we're saying is the actual online learning design is what's been assessed and what we have accredited with those levels and the badges and things.
Thanks. So just before we get Tom to join us, and everybody can thank you, Dominique, there's one quick one that Andy's brought up that I thought was quite useful to give us a sense of any other discussions we might have later. You mentioned OLC and that they were happy to come to the party, but they've got their own, so would they be looking to replace or update theirs, or just to try and map it, do some appropriate mapping between this and theirs? How would that work for you?
So yes, we talked to them about theirs, and they've actually said that they've recognised that then theirs needs to be updated, and they feel that this might be a good opportunity, and the timeliness of being able to benchmark globally is very attractive to all of them. The other thing I'll say is that potentially, I think, because I had several discussions, but then I had a discussion with 4 players in the room. So there was ILTA, ALT and OLC, because the other one that we're working with at the moment is Eden, but Eden weren't at this collaborative discussion. But I will say that having all of those players in the room, sometimes there's that fear of missing out. So I think that's also been a very motivating factor for them, the fact that they can get this global purview. And of course they're up against Quality Matters, so they've seen that their product may not be as highly regarded as Quality Matters. Mind you, Quality Matters has gone to a very expensive model at the moment, so they actually think that it is quite timely to be able to revise or review their product and see where maybe there are some affordances with taking on board what we've been doing with ours.
So much, Dominique. Could everybody just
can I just do one other plug? Sorry, Kate, can I just do one other plug? Just to let everyone know that we are having these consultation workshops that I've mentioned quite a bit throughout the webinar, and they're going to be held in Sydney, Melbourne, Canberra, Brisbane, Wollongong. We're also holding one in Auckland and one in Wellington, and we're holding one in Singapore. At the moment, the Singapore numbers are very low. So if anyone would like to join one of those consultation workshops, if they want to email myself, I don't know if you have my email, but if they want to email myself, I'll be very happy to. Oh, sorry, yes, Tracy, there is one in Adelaide. Tracy, you're already down in Adelaide. I think I've emailed you the details of Adelaide. So yes, there's also one in Adelaide. And we are also providing some stipends to help people who are remotely located come to those, very central workshops. Great.
Thanks so much, Dominique. I'm sure there'll probably be heaps more questions. If you do have questions, obviously try and try and bring your feedback in through workshops and other means. But for now, if everybody could thank Dominique for presenting. And next up, we have Tom Cochran.